Some people wake up every day with a burden of needing to fit in, to smile when they want to scream, to please others when all they truly want is to disappear. But what if I told you there's a way to live without bending yourself to fit into spaces that were never meant for you? This is the story of Clara, an ordinary woman who grew tired of seeking approval and chose instead to learn the discipline of self-respect. What changed her life? It wasn't magic. It was philosophy. And perhaps it might change yours as well. Some people wake up every day with a tightness in their chest. They go to work with a constant feeling that they're just one step away from failing, as if it's only a matter of time before everyone realizes they're not as capable as they seem. Yet on the outside, they smile, meet their responsibilities, and sincerely praise others. But inside, there's a persistent fear of not being enough, of not measuring up. Have you ever felt this way? Today's story begins with a woman named Clara. She was 39 years old, a mother of two, and worked as a supervisor at a small print shop in the city center. Clara was known for being meticulous, responsible, and kind to her co-workers. But no one knew the weight she carried. From a very young age, Clara developed a kind of emotional radar. She could sense every shift in tone, every heavy sigh, every forced smile. And immediately, her mind would turn against her. Is he mad at me? Did I talk too much? Was I out of line? Clara lived in a state of constant vigilance, always adjusting her behavior to avoid conflict or disappointment. This behavior began in childhood. She grew up in a home where affection was conditional on performance. If she got high grades, she received affection. If she made a mistake, she was met with silence and coldness. Without words, she learned that love had to be earned, and that mistakes were dangerous. Over time, Clara became an expert at pleasing others, anticipating their needs, and avoiding problems. But she also lost touch with her own authenticity. In the eyes of others, Clara was admirable, always helpful, always smiling, always competent. But inside, she was exhausted. She'd come home drained, often without the energy to talk to her children. She lived in fear of disappointing people at work. Even when she was being praised, her mind whispered, "You did okay today, but how long before they realize you're not that good?" Everything changed one rainy Monday afternoon. Clara received a call from her youngest child's school. He had experienced an anxiety episode. Nothing serious, but the school psychologist suggested the family talk more openly about emotions. That hit Clara in a way she didn't expect. For the first time, she realized the silent patterns she had carried for so long were echoing in her son's behavior, and it shook her deeply. The next day, Clara decided to seek therapy. In the sessions, she began to understand how deeply her need for approval had shaped her life. She didn't know how to say no. She didn't set boundaries. And worse, she didn't know how to express what she truly felt, because she was afraid of being rejected. The therapist then said a sentence that marked her. "You don't have to be perfect to be loved. And those who only love your perfect version don't truly love you." That sentence became a turning point. Clara began to observe herself with more compassion. She started asking, what do I really want? What am I feeling right now? Is this about me or someone else's expectations? And for the first time in years, she began to live with more presence and less guilt. Throughout her therapy sessions, Clara began to notice something even deeper. What hurt her most wasn't the events themselves, but the way she reacted to them. If someone didn't reply to a message, she felt a lump in her throat. If she made a small mistake at work, she would spend hours punishing herself mentally. It was as if her worth was always in other people's hands, and that made her vulnerable. It was in this context that her therapist recommended reading an ancient Roman philosopher, Epictetus. At first, Clara was skeptical. Philosophy? Right now, while she was trying to bring order to chaos. But she gave it a chance. She started with short passages, Simple notes. And there, in the words of a man who had lived nearly 2,000 years ago, she found a kind of clarity she had never experienced. One of the first Stoic ideas that moved her was the distinction between what is within our control and what is not. Epictetus said, "The things that are within our power are, by nature, free. Those that are not are fragile, subject to control of others." That struck her like a warning bell. Clara had been trying to control reactions, other people's emotions, invisible expectations, all things that, no matter how hard she tried, would never be in her hands. What was? Her thoughts, her response, her judgment. This insight brought a lightness she had never imagined possible. Instead of asking, "Why did this person act that way toward me?" she began to ask, "What can I learn from this situation?" When she made a mistake, instead of sinking into guilt, she practiced Stoic self-reflection. Was this an avoidable mistake? What can I do differently tomorrow? Another lesson that stayed with her was the idea that difficulty is part of the path. Seneca wrote, "Difficulty strengthens the mind, just as labor strengthens the body." Clara began to see life's challenges not as injustices, but as practical exercises in growth. When her boss handed her an unexpected task, she no longer saw it as a cruel test, but as an opportunity to develop patience, resilience, or assertiveness. But perhaps the most defining moment came when Clara decided to say no to a social event. Until then, she always said yes, even when exhausted, out of fear of seeming rude or distant. This time, she honored her limit. When the person responded coldly, she felt a familiar discomfort, the urge to explain herself, to justify. But she remembered Marcus Aurelius, who wrote, "If it is in accordance with human nature, accept it. If not, do not complain." That gave her strength. She was acting with coherence and clarity, and that was enough. Over time, Clara began to write daily reflections, just as the ancient Stoics did. It wasn't anything elaborate. Sometimes, she simply wrote, "Today I was firm without being harsh, and it gave me peace." Other times, she would confess, "I felt guilty for putting myself first, but I resisted the urge to invalidate my needs." These writings became an honest mirror of her inner journey. And to be clear, she didn't become cold, distant, or indifferent. Quite the opposite. Clara learned to be more present in her relationships because she was no longer trying to guess what others wanted to hear. She simply was. And that freed her energy, her creativity, her joy. If you watched this video this far, perhaps there's a part of you that longs to break free from suffocating expectations and live with greater authenticity. And if this message resonated with you, I invite you to subscribe to this channel. Not as a favor to me, but as a gift to yourself, a way to keep this pursuit of clarity and inner strength alive. And I want to offer a special invitation. Share in the comments a moment when you realize you were trying to control the uncontrollable. Let's create a space where our stories become tools for mutual growth. Clara didn't transform overnight. There were setbacks. There were still days when she woke up with a tight chest, questioning whether she had made the right choice by distancing herself from certain friendships, by setting boundaries, by choosing silence over forced explanations. But there was something new in how she dealt with these insecurities, the awareness that the mind is trainable, that suffering doesn't always come from pain, but from resistance to pain. It was while reading a passage from Epictetus that everything finally seemed to click. He wrote, "People are not disturbed by things, but by the views they take of them." Clara wrote that at the top of a page in her reflection journal, circled it, and underneath she wrote, "Maybe I'll never control what happens to me, but I can always choose how to interpret it." This daily choice became a practice. When she heard criticism, she took a breath. When she received a sideways glance, she tried not to immediately interpret as rejection. She began to question her first emotional reaction. Like a good Stoic in training, She didn't take the first impulse as truth. She waited, observed, and then chose a response. Her relationship with work also changed. Before, she saw the environment as a minefield. Any misstep could damage her image. Now, she saw it as a field of learning. A poorly resolved conflict with a co-worker became an exercise in empathetic communication. A poorly rated project turned into a lesson in accepting criticism without losing personal worth. She understood that dignity doesn't come from approval, but from the coherence between her values and her actions. In her personal relationships, Clara became more selective, not in the sense of excluding people, but in choosing where to invest her energy. She learned that not every bond needs to be rescued, that not every connection deserves maintenance. Some people are part of a chapter, others are the whole story. And that's okay. She stopped chasing after connections that required her to shrink herself. She began to value the relationships that flourished in the presence of her truth, not her performance. And with all this, something interesting happened. Clara began to inspire others. Co-workers would ask what she was doing to feel more centered. A friend commented that talking to her felt lighter, as if she were with someone who truly listened without judgment. But Clara knew this wasn't a gift. It was practice. It was Stoicism in real life. Of course, there were down days, doubts, anxiety, but now she saw these moments as part of the cycle. Like the philosopher who said, "Do not seek for things to happen the way you want them to. Rather, wish that what happens happen as it does, and your life will be serene." With this mindset, Clara began to accept more and resist less. And with every new difficulty, she would ask herself, what is this pain trying to teach me? Today, Clara is still on her path. She hasn't reached a state of full wisdom, and maybe she never will. But she found a kind of peace that doesn't depend on circumstances, but on an inner posture. Stoicism didn't make her hard. It made her strong. It made her firmer, but also more compassionate, with others and with herself. And maybe that's what you're seeking too. Not a manual to become invincible, but a way of living that allows you to walk through the storms with your feet on the ground and your mind at peace. If this video touched you in some way, I warmly invite you to subscribe to this channel, not just to receive more content like this, but to be part of a community that has chosen to grow with awareness, instead of reacting on autopilot. And tell me in the comments, at what moment in your life did you have to learn to stand your ground without losing yourself? What helped you, or what still challenges you? Your story might help someone else find their own path. Let's make this space a meeting point for those who are tired of just surviving and want, finally, to live with clarity, balance, and truth. If this video spoke to you in any way, if it made you think or feel differently, then this channel is yours too. Go ahead and subscribe. Come walk with us. There's always room for one more story here.